Welcome back to Inside City Hall. The House committee investigating the January 6th attack voted unanimously yesterday to subpoena former President Donald Trump. It was the panel's final session before the midterm elections. The lawmakers are demanding that Trump testify after unveiling alarming and never-before-seen video of Speaker Pelosi and Senator Schumer and other congressional leaders during the lockdown. The members of the committee are arguing that Trump bears singular blame for the attack and remains a threat to democracy. Now, earlier today, Trump himself denounced the panel and repeated false claims about the 2020 election. He also sidestepped the important question of whether or not he intends to testify. Joining me now with more on all of this and what comes next, we've got Dan Goldman. He's the former lead counsel in the first impeachment trial of former President Trump. He's also the Democratic nominee in the race for the 10th Congressional District. Welcome back to the program. Good to see you.
Good to see you, Errol.
Were you at all surprised by that final vote, that dramatic vote unanimously to subpoena Donald Trump?
Well, I certainly wasn't surprised at what the vote was. The potentially surprising aspect was that they brought it to a vote. And, you know, this had been in the discussion for months now. And I think ultimately what they realized and what they decided is this is an investigation in part for historical record. And Donald Trump was so clearly at the center of everything that happened in the lead up to January 6th, as well as the day of January 6th and the insurrection, that he has incredibly relevant information. And as the committee investigating that episode and the effort to overturn the election, it was incumbent upon them to seek his testimony.
And is that in some ways a formality? I mean, you know, they've made up their mind. They've presented a narrative of what they think happened. They're going to put together a final report. Does it really matter whether he shows up?
Well, it matters to the extent that, you know, the American people deserve to learn what information we have from what information Donald Trump has. What is so fascinating about this is that there is no expectation from anyone that Donald Trump will comply with this subpoena. And what it just shows is the degree to which he has transformed the discourse and lowered expectations for someone of his stature in our country, that no one expects him to abide by the law because he never does abide by the law.
That is an extraordinary reality that we're living through. I guess to round out the discussion about what happens, if you disregard a subpoena, you can be held in contempt of Congress. At least 4 people have been so held, right? Even just with this investigation.
Yeah, Stephen Bannon was held in contempt, referred to the Department of Justice, and ultimately was convicted and is now awaiting sentencing. But that's not going to happen to Donald Trump. We have 2 months, effectively 2.5 months left of this Congress, and I think the committee will wrap up all of its work and its report by the end of the year before the new Congress starts. So they're not going to go through the process of referring it over to the Department of Justice. Would they hold him in contempt? It's possible in the lame duck session they would, but I wouldn't expect much to come from this. I think it was a symbolic gesture.
And what you're talking about is a formal referral, because that's the process of holding someone in contempt of Congress. I've heard a lot of talk in media about, well, if crimes were committed, are they going to make a formal referral to the Department of Justice? And just to be clear, as a veteran of that department, the Department of Justice does not need anybody to tell them to investigate a possible violation of the law, right?
So I think it would be ill-advised for the committee to make a criminal referral related to Donald Trump and his conduct around the election in January 6th. In part because, as you say, the Department of Justice is already investigating that. We know that. And the only thing that would do is to give it a tinge of politicization, to have Congress referring to the Department of Justice. So there's nothing to gain by it. And I don't think there's much to lose, but there's potentially a little bit to lose. However, what they were talking about yesterday is a referral to the Department of Justice related to efforts to tamper with witnesses or obstruct justice. Those are the types of things that the committee has specialized knowledge of that the department would not necessarily know about. and that's appropriate for a referral to the Department of Justice.
And then now you, to a certain extent, have been an outsider like the rest of us. From what you've seen from the testimony so far, what possible violations of federal law have taken place in and around the January 6th riots? And I'm talking about beyond the 800+ cases that the FBI is already looking into.
So look, you know, there's the potential for Donald Trump and others around him, and we'll just focus on him at the top of the food chain here, to be charged with seditious conspiracy. There's the possibility of him being charged with obstructing the Congress's counting of the votes. But I think the best and most relevant and appropriate charge would be to charge him with a conspiracy to overturn the election. Robert Mueller charged that exact crime in his 2 indictments of the Russians. And that is exactly what is the appropriate charge. It makes January 6th sort of the culmination of a long-term conspiracy. And that's what we saw yesterday. This was planned in July. There was a draft speech written on October 31st for Donald Trump to declare himself the winner on November 3rd, when, of course, they wouldn't know the outcome. So that, to me, is the best charge, because it will bring in all of what the January 6th committee revealed over the last few months.
And if the defense on the other side is, look, we had a good faith reason, this is what Rudy Giuliani told me on this program, if we have good faith reasons to doubt the elections were done fairly in this state or that state, if we genuinely think that the Electoral College vote should not have gone forward on January 6th, what's the answer to that?
Well, let's assume he's right, and he's not, but let's assume he's right. There is no good faith basis to believe anything that Rudy Giuliani is saying. And in fact, a court in New York determined that Rudy Giuliani was a liar and lied to other courts and lost his bar license because of it. There is no good faith basis to believe any of the things that they are saying. And so what they would have to show is that there's no rational human being would ever believe what they peddled.
Was the committee, do you think, well advised to structure their hearings the way they did? Because I don't think we've ever seen anything quite like it. I mean, they hired specifically a former TV executive, and they structured it like a drama. This was like sort of the season finale, and they ended it on the shot going from one member to the next, all voting to send a subpoena to the former president.
Yeah, you know, when we did the first impeachment investigation, we did treat it more like, you know, a traditional criminal investigation. And especially when the Senate trial, we approached that like you would a summation in a trial, where you're mixing audio, visual, transcripts. You're trying to make it much more of a presentation than just reading a speech. This committee has taken that and just done a magnificent job of really running with that concept. Now, they benefit dramatically from the fact that there are effectively no one from the minority on this committee. In most congressional committees, you have the majority, the minority, and you have the 5-minute rule where you're going back and forth. They didn't have this time. So they had 2.5 hours to do whatever they wanted with and to structure it in whatever way they want. They really took terrific advantage of that opportunity, but that's part of the reason why you see these hearings as so different from other hearings, because you can't do that really well in other hearings.
In our last minute, if you're successful, you'll be joining this body in January. It will be polarized to an extent you may not be quite prepared for. Although you've seen a lot of this up close, you would then be a peer with some of these folks. How do you expect to sort of navigate that?
Well, look, hopefully we are in the majority, and I'm doing everything I can to help the Democrats in New York. I've opened up a leadership PAC in order to support them, and I know all of my colleagues, and around the country are doing everything we can. I think if we're in the majority, we're in a very different situation, much more similar to where we are right now, and we can really move forward our policy prerogatives that are so important to help Americans, to help people lift them up, give them access to the opportunities that all Americans deserve. If we're in the minority, you can expect incredible overreach and vengefulness and revenge from the Republicans they will almost certainly try to impeach Joe Biden because they disagree with his policies, which of course is not a grounds for impeachment. They will have every investigation of Hunter Biden and the Mueller investigation and the FBI and everything you can imagine. Their sort of, top 5 playbook of conspiracy theories and other things. And the Republicans will grind everything to a halt. There may be opportunities to work across the aisle. Unfortunately, many of the Republicans who traditionally have done that have either retired or lost. But there are areas of potential compromise: energy independence and renewable energy, early childhood education, criminal justice reform, and hopefully some, more comprehensive immigration reform. But this is a different Republican Party. They're not acting in good faith, and so I wouldn't expect a lot of cooperation.
Okay, we'll see if that plays out differently, perhaps. Maybe not quite so much of a battle come January, but we'll see. Thanks a whole lot for coming by.
Thanks so much for having me.
Let's take a break now. Coming up, I will break down this week's top political stories with our Friday Reporters Roundtable. Stay with us.